Thank you everyone for joining us. Most of us here have kind of become accustomed to the new normal. The pandemic has disrupted almost everything that we had once took for granted. But one of the good outcomes is that it has made us more connected. We are able to sustain our dialogues through online interfaces. So today we have Dr. V. Selvakumar with us. Dr. Selvakumar doesn't require an introduction, especially for those who are interested in this subject. Our favorite tagline is that he was part of the team that originally narrowed down the area where Sangam Airport, Muchilipattanam was situated, somewhere near Kodungalur in present Kerala. He has also made many more significant contributions in the field of archaeology and maritime history. His various research papers are part of reputed publications. He also presents his paper in various conferences across the world and have been a singular, forceful voice in sharing the invaluable knowledge about our region's unified history. He presently serves as a faculty member in the Department of Maritime History and Marine Archaeology at Tamil University, Tanjavur. This session is being organized as part of Ekalokam Trust for Photography's Images of Encounter talk show series. When the pandemic hit, it was quite tempting for our team to hide behind the dark corridors of uncertainty. This prolonged political, economical, and financial standstill moment is quite daunting for almost everyone, especially for art and cultural organizations. But we decided to step up and connect with the fraternity. With the support of Jugaad Photo Bazaar, an online portal for buying and selling photography, and Photo Mail, an online magazine, we have presented 29 photographers in the Images of Encounter online show. Photographers from around the world are part of this show. I hope you have seen the show. If not, do take a look. I promise that it will be engaging and thought-provoking. Today's subject, Art in Sangam period, is an important one. Knowing our roots will go a long way in defining our present and informing our future. This subject is also of particular interest to Ekalokam Trust for Photography. ETP is a registered foundation. We are dedicated to create, share, and preserve a comprehensive visual narrative, especially of the region corresponding to ancient Tamilagam and its connected maritime cultures across the silk, spice, and incense routes. Now, this is a 2,000-year-old history connecting this part of India with the Afro-Arabian, Asian, Mediterranean, European cultures and lifestyles. Our interest is to relook this history parallelly in the present times and leave footprints for the future. We feel that this sort of focused narrative would serve to highlight our shared history and collective lineage rather than homogenize divisive identities and lifestyles. Our core value is creativity. By encouraging creative expression, we like to recognize our diversity and promote inclusiveness, peace, and harmony. This vision is our guiding star, and we are at the moment researching and simultaneously creating visual narratives. We often present them in the form of exhibitions, talk shows, publications. Ultimately, we like to set up region-specific permanent archives and micro-museums. ETP does not have sustained institutional, government, or CSR funding. So it has been a slow and steady process. In the last 7 years, we have made a small but significant contribution through our various public initiatives. So that's who we are. We have a long association with Dr. Selvakumar, and his expert advice has greatly guided and helped us in shaping ETP's vision. Thank you, sir, for joining us today and for all your contributions. I request you to take over.
Okay, thank you, Tulasi Swarna Lakshmi. I would like to first of all thank the Ekalokam Trust for Photography, ETP, and Tulasi and Abul Kalam Asad for inviting me to make this presentation. I've been interacting with them for almost 5-6 years. It has been a wonderful experience. And also, I just visited their online exhibition on images of encounter. It is fantastic, and it has a vast collection of images of photographers across the world, and it is really worth visiting and appreciating. As an archaeologist, we are also photographers. Archaeologists sometimes may not be a good photographers, but archaeology as a discipline needs photography very much. Archaeology is not there without photography, whether it is aerial photography or it is satellite imagery or micro photography or macro photography, in which we document very tiny say seeds or pollens which are microscopic in nature, right from the objects and other antiquities or precious artifacts or precious workmanship of the past communities. Photography is very essential in order to convey the results of an excavation. Photography is the key technique or key medium that brings out the importance of an archaeological excavation. Even if a person does an archaeological excavation meticulously, if the photography is very poor, the result will be very bad, especially for communicating with the public and also interacting with the public and creating an awareness. Photography is very important. With these few words, I will move on to my today's lecture. In fact, I was asked to speak about art in the Sangam age. I was pondering over this topic. Then I decided to speak on arts and crafts, and I was looking for definition of arts. And it's been really a long exercise into the intricacy of the human mind. And as you know, there is no agreed definition of arts, and there are multiple views, contradicting views on the definition of arts, and it is better not to go into those theoretical perspectives. So I decided to focus on arts and crafts and visual culture of the Iron Age early historic period in Tamilakam. But before that, we will look into some of the standard definition given by the scholars on art. Art is an entities, artifacts or performances. Here the term artifact is very important. Archaeologists deal with artifact. We divide this world into two. One is ecofact and the other is artifact. Ecofact refers to any kind of object that is naturally available, naturally made, and humans have no role in them. Even our own body is an ecofact. And then artifact specifically refers to any of the objects that are made or modified by human beings. So we call artifact as anything that has been created by human beings. We use the another term, material culture. Material culture, how we manipulate and play with the material to produce diverse artifacts. In fact, I feel that art is in the nature itself, because humans do not create anything new. The idea of art is there in nature. As a young boy growing in a village, I always used to like the bulls, the animals, the male cattle, and I used to play with their dewlap, and sometimes they are so friendly. Especially, I like the eye of the bull. The eye of the bull is something wonderful. The way I see the perfect circle in the eye of the bull, even wherever I see it's so attractive. Not only that, even if you go into the crystal, even if you go into the crystal structures, universe, and even human beings, we are almost very symmetrically produced. Even in our own body, there is an element of art. Therefore, nature has art everywhere. Humans generally, they try to copy what is there, or they try to give a meaning. There are also theories whether art is in the object itself or it is in our own perception. So we need not go into these kind of discussions, philosophical discussions that will take us elsewhere. So here we will look into this definition. Entities intentionally endowed by their makers with a significant degree of aesthetic interest. So aesthetic is the key attribute of art, often greatly surpassing the most everyday objects. So here, the contemporary definition of art looks for something which is exotic. But as archaeologists and historians, we try to see art or aesthetic quality in all kinds of material objects. Like the way we cannot judge a kid like the way we judge an adult. So when we look into the most earliest human ancestors, we need to really get into their mind. And there is a branch of archaeology called cognitive archaeology that tries to get into the minds of the prehistoric humans and how they started visualizing this world, how they started making paintings from how they started understanding the three-dimensional world and started reproducing as rock painting in two-dimensional world. This is a fantastic kind of invention. The same way how they developed language, even the language attributing certain meanings to certain sound is also a fantastic discovery. As cognitive archaeologists, we try to look into the human mind, how human mind developed, how they designed artifacts, how they worked on these minute ideas. When you try to get into the human mind in a very deep or intensive manner, you will appreciate all kinds of artifacts as a form of art. In fact, in the earliest stages of human history. So here, this particular definition gives about the degree of significant degree of aesthetic interest, often greatly surpassing that of most everyday objects. Here, anything which is common is not considered art, and first appeared hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago and exists in virtually every known human culture. So we have material culture with artistic component in almost all culture, and we can also look into Leo Tolstoy's definition. Art is not, as a metaphysician say, the manifestation of some mysterious idea of beauty or God. It is not an aesthetic, physiologists say, a game in which man lets off his excess of stored energy. It is not the expression of man's emotion by external sign. It is not the production of pleasing object. And above all, it is not pleasure, but it is a means of union among men, joining them together with in the same feelings, and indispensable for the life and progress towards well-being of individuals and humanities. Here we can see an advanced kind of definition into the art and visual culture as scholars deal in anthropology and archaeology and art history disciplines. Here is perhaps the best understood as a tactic for studying functions of a world addressed through pictures, images, and visualization rather than through text and words. So here I am taking, for this particular presentation, I am not going to go into the Sangam text or Sangam literature. I am simply taking the material objects produced by the people about 1,500 to 3,000 years ago in Tamilnadu region, comprising Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and try to visualize how these objects display the aesthetic properties or artistic mind of the people who lived here, and how the cross-cultural connections are brought out in the forms of art. So, as I pointed out earlier, generally it is believed that art is not something common. It is considered something special, something different from the commonly occurring things. And also art is in the perception of the beholder. So as we say, beauty is something in the eyes of the beholder. Same way, as I said, I used to be very thrilled by looking at the eyes of the bull, and also their overall appearance. I used to get enthralled by that. There are so many things, even little birds and others. We really wonder how nature produces such kind of things, ecofacts or even artifacts. When you look into the crystalline structures, you get fantastic forms occurring naturally. So humans, they try to create or recreate or deform those things and produce a kind of form of art through various kinds of means that we will see. Now we are seeing a hand axe. This was produced in the Paleolithic age about 10 lakhs years ago, or it can go up to 2 million years ago based on the recent finding, even 2.5 and 3 million years ago in Africa. If you look at this particular object, see, it has a perfect symmetry, and it shows that the prehistoric humans had a sense of perfection. Therefore, it should be, in my opinion, should be considered as a piece of art. And people may disagree with that, but the way considering the humans' capacity of thinking about 2 million years ago, they could finally chip away the stones and bring into a symmetrical shape, and their botheration for perfection definitely gives a status of art to these people. In addition to that, if you go to the Mesolithic age, people started making triangles and lunates. So obviously there is an element of function attached to these objects. Still, they display certain aesthetic properties. Also, humans as an individuals try to create things which are symmetrical. We need to ask several questions. Why do we construct our house in a perfect square or in a rectangle or in a circular fashion? Why not in a twisted manner? Suppose if you have a photograph hanging on the wall, if it is slightly twisted, we try to correct it. No, why do we do that? These are all different kinds of perception in art. Humans have this particular kind of orientation. It is not only art, it has much more deeper meaning how humans view this world and how they want it to be. These are all certain kinds of orders brought by humans as part of their culture. These are all certain Upper Paleolithic images known as Venus images. They are found mainly in Europe. They actually reveal about the beautiful artistic talents of Paleolithic people in Europe. And now we will move on to the Sangam age and Tamilakam region. And we have limited time. Within another 35 minutes, I will try to convey my ideas by showing several images. Now we are dealing with the ancient Tamilakam, and which covers the area south of Thiruvangadam or Tirupati hills, and covers the Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Chera Chola Pandyas were ruling in this region. And we have a lot of beautiful structures of Iron Age period, and they themselves depict certain features, certain kind of designs. We are still not able to interpret them. Now what you see is a megalithic burial, and people of this time in Iron Age in South India, they gave a lot of importance to their ancestors and dead people, and they built houses or residences for their ancestors in a systematic manner. Here, what do you see? Their architectural conception. How do we conceive space? Architecture is about conceiving space, conceiving a living space, as well as the space for the dead. Here you can see this two chambers in front, and then four kind of enclosures on different directions. We do not know why they gave these kind of enclosures, whether each enclosure represent an individual, we do not know. But interestingly, if you look at the porthole, it is something important. Sometimes it is circular, sometimes it is trapezoidal, sometime on the right hand side you see one in the shape of a keyhole or in the shape of a human. So this is, sometimes these could have been created for babies. We do not know the symbolic or the real function behind these chambers, but interestingly they convey how these people were giving meanings to these different forms. They may not be really art per se, but they were kind of symbols created for certain purpose. Why there are four chambers? Why two of them have trapezoidal entrance? Why one on the left has circular, one on the right has a keyhole or human cross-like cruciform-like porthole? These portholes were considered as part of the belief that these people had an idea of soul. They wanted to leave a space so that the soul after the death can come inside and go out of these houses, out of these the residence of the dead. This is one particular theory. You can see that they have given proper space for the dead. These are from the site of Purundal. You can see the circular entrance, and it has been properly closed. And this is the another kind of keyhole or cruciform shaped entrance. This is very interesting. Should we consider these as a form of art or these as a form of a function. So clearly we can see the subjective viewpoint, and sometimes people may see as a form of an art, but it could be simply a symbolic kind of form that had certain functional purpose. So these people believed in the life after the death, and also they were kind of warrior community. They buried long swords and also daggers along with the dead people. And you see another kind of monument called Kodakal, and this also must be a kind of art. You can see it as a kind of art because it has a specific design and it has a specific shape. We do not know whether it has some meaning. Some people have compared this with stupa and also an umbrella. It is also known as Kodakal, or in Malayalam, it could be simply a Kodak offering a kind of gift for the dead. Interestingly, in India, we have a lot of Buddhist monuments called stupas, and the stupas evolved from this. On top of the stupa, you find chhatri or umbrella. See, this umbrella has a lot of meaning. It was a kind of status symbols. When people made a lot of these burials, only some individuals were given these kind of monuments in the shape of a Kudakal. We don't know what it means. This is another kind of monument called sometimes as Tupikal or Kudakal, documented by Babington in the early period from northern part of Kerala. And these are double dolmens. You get several such images of these architectural edifices, sometimes very small, sometimes big. They do convey the conception of these people. I'll not take much time. You know how these people have conceived these burials, and they have followed certain kinds of rules or certain kinds of grammar in constructing these burials. They were not simply created. So probably there existed some meanings and symbolism we are not able to understand. This is a sarcophagus. This was excavated near Pondicherry during the colonial period by Castle. Right now it is in Misigime, Pondicherry. This is Misigime, Paris. This is another image of the same sarcophagus. So these people created these kind of the receptacles for the dead people and then buried them. This one is very interesting. It is in the shape of a kind of a ram, male goat. This was found in Shankavaram in Andhra Pradesh. Right now, this is in Chennai Museum. See, look at this design, how it has been, the receptacle for the dead person has been created in the form of a male goat. We do not know why they gave such a symbolism behind. On the side, you find a lot of black and red ware pottery. This is from Modur near Tiruvannamalai. Here you see a megalithic monument in the shape of a human, or it is some kind of symbol, and it is called anthropomorph. In Andhra Pradesh, there are also these kind of monuments in the shape of a women with their all different parts. In fact, they are very interesting. We do not know why they gave such a shape. Should we call them some kind of art or some kind of symbol? And definitely they had some symbolic meaning, and it is very important. We are not able to get into the minds of those people, so we start interpreting from our own term. This is one of the issues that we face in archaeology. We do not have access to the minds of the past societies, so we try to interpret, we try to give a different meaning, like the way modern art is interpreted by different people. That leads to multiplicity of interpretation and subjective viewpoints, and sometimes archaeology is treated as a kind of fun, and the interpretations are treated as a kind of game. So wherein we give meanings in the contemporary context. This is one of the issues. This is a menhir from Palakkad area. So you find these kind of different kinds of monuments erected for the dead. And here you can see a rocket cave from Kerala. This is from Krishna Raj photograph, who documented this in Kerala. Here you can see a beautiful rocket cave, and here this is where something very important, very rare piece. It gives us an understanding how these people were constructing their houses. Probably this also has some kind of early idea for the Kerala type of temples, where you can see this circular structure. So definitely something is going on, and early people of Kerala were building houses in a particular fashions for which we don't have any direct evidence. This rocket cave is a very important evidence. Here you can see in another rocket cave, there is a central pillar. This has been carved something like an umbrella, typical old style umbrella. So here the carvers have used their imagination in creating this particular kind of pillar. This is from Kerala. And now we are moving on to Archimedu, where we can see a lot of material cultural evidences. Here we can see, you can see a spacer, necklace spacer. It illustrates the artistic skills of these people, the jewelers who are making ornaments. This is a spacer. What normally we wear jewelry of 5 or 4 strings. When you wear them without the spacer, they get entangled. So these people were making these kind of spacers to be used as part of ornament. These are some of the glass beads that were fabricated at Archimedu. And this is a beautiful diadem, and probably it was put on the top of the forehead of the dead people, and also it was used as a kind of ornament. You can see 2 holes on 2 ends. Probably it was attached to the head, and it was excavated at the site of Adichanallur. Here you can see certain intricate designs, and these designs have certain kinds of meanings. We do not know what they are, but definitely we find these kinds of objects illustrating certain kind of symbolic concept of those people. Now what you see is a motif of a ship on a pottery. This is from Alahankulam, an ancient port on the east coast. Here you can see an illustration. Probably the person who was there at the site of, probably he could be a trader, he has precisely drawn the ship that is attributed to Romans. You have references in Sangam literature to Yavanar Tanda Vinaima Nankalam Ponnodu Vandu Kariyodu Perum Valam Kedu Musuris. There, Yavanas were the term applied to the Westerners, as any Westerners, right from Greek to the people from West Asia, and there are clear indication that the ships of Yavanas came to the west coast. Here, this ship is also correlated to the Yavana type of ship, and the person who has drawn this has minutely observed the oar and all other mast and all the features very beautifully. And this is definitely a piece of art excavated at the site of Alahankulam, dated to the early historic period. And this is where we get the fusion of ideas crossing the Indian Ocean and emerging. These are all horse stirrups found in the megalithic burials, and you find a lot of such objects in these megalithic burials, and people were worshipping. This one has a lot of objects, ear ornaments and other objects from the site of Kiradi, which was excavated by Archaeological Survey of India, Amarnath Ramakrishna. Here you can see certain beautiful gamesmen, and these are probably made of ivory. These are all actually ear ornaments. These are ear ornaments. These are one type of ear ornaments which people put it on their ears, and you see such kind of designs in the later period also. These are all bone styly. People could have used them for writing and drawing also. So unfortunately, we do not have any materials or the paintings. I am very sure people of the Sangam age were definitely painting, and we have definite evidence for paintings in Tamil Nadu right from the megalithic period, if not earlier, our Iron Age period. We need to research further. We have a lot of evidence of rock art. This is from Mallapadi. We have Kirvalai, Setavarai, several sites where painting shows sometimes horses. The paintings which shows our horses are considered to be Iron Age in date. Though we have not dated them, there are problems in dating the rock art. We can definitely say the rock paintings are the earliest forms of expression of art in South India, besides the stone tools which are of Paleolithic and Mesolithic period. If you look at that, this particular scene depicts two warriors seated on a horse fighting with each other with a long spear. This is something very interesting, and the artist has really represented, really documented what really happened in that particular point of time. So we should consider them not just as a painting, as a kind of record, historical record. We fail to consider them as a historical record. In fact, they were the earliest forms of records, and only later on we have these images. Therefore, we could really call them as a kind of hero stone. Hero stone or hero images, not really hieroglyphs, in the sense that we have hero stones appearing in the say later period, in the early medieval period in South India, with the sculptures carved. I have proposed a theory that the earliest forms of heroes, hero remembrance was through painting. So we should call them as herographs, or in the sense that the heroes' activities were remembered through these paintings. Thus, the paintings, the artistic talent really helped people to document their ways of life, and also things in that they also express their knowledge. Sometimes we also get X-ray paintings in which people show the internal organs. We have several paintings across in which people depict their ways of life. In fact, art is associated with, though we separate art from our ways of life in the modern sense, in fact, for ancient people, art was related to their ways of life, their belief system. We should see broadly art as a forms of cognition, their cognitive beliefs. Therefore, I would like to propose that these paintings were the earliest method of remembering the heroes. They should be considered as a prelude to hero stones. This is another kind of painting from Kovanur near Coimbatore. This was documented by K.T. Gandhirajan. And here you can see the way people have depicted animals, and sometimes you find a very naturalistic style how these people are depicting. So I had a chance to interview a Paliyan person who was making these paintings. In a way, we could understand them from a different perspective. I'll talk about that later. So here I am trying to speak about Edakal rock art, and here I am trying to correlate this cultural tradition, Sangam Tamil texts and Theyyam, devil dances of Kerala. And we have these Edakal or engravings, which are the earliest representation of petroglyph found in South India. In fact, they deserve to be made as a World Heritage Monument, because here these people have used a very naturalistic simple line. How they have beautifully used the simple lines and then breaks just simply by engraving on the surface. They have created diverse symbols and diverse images conveying some kind of ideas. Edakal could be a kind of place, a shrine or a sacred spot of the shamans. That is one interpretation scholars have put forward. Here you can see a human kind of figure holding something in the hand. This is something interesting. Here you can see another bat-like image. You find a lot of such images. Here you can see another image. So it and also something like a wheel and bullock cart. So many images are found at Edakal. And this is from Marayur in Kerala, where you have paintings with wavy lines. And here, this figure is doing this kind of dance that is very common in South India. In even today, we have a way of dancing this way for on several occasions. and this particular posture is very similar. So I tried to understand the Edakal paintings by looking at the documentation made by Edgar Thurston on some of the devil dances in the Western Ghats. Here you can see Nalke Tulu, and this is from Karnataka, and you can see those images. So when we are trying to understand these early forms, we need to look at the Theyyam form, which is prevalent in Malabar, northern Kerala, and also these kind of documentation during the colonial period. So here you can see another, this is Malayan who bites a kind of chicken in his mouth, and this is another devil dance, and these kind of documentations are there. This is a modern Theyyam dancer. Here you can see this image is very similar to what is found at Edakal. So these are some of the other forms. I'll not go into the detail. So these line art graffiti is a very peculiar style, very similar to, it is a very unique style of Kerala, and this represent one of the early form of art tradition in Kerala, in which they simply use the lines to create these kind of forms. So what I did was I tried to correlate this with Velan Veriyadal found in Tamil literature. I referred to some of the poems, Sangam poems, and correlated this particular kind of reference. I'll not go into the detail how the Sangam poem mentions that Velan, how Velan is a god, something like Muruga, and he possesses and the shaman dances, and this is one way of a kind of counseling existed that was existing among the people, where people, in order to solve their day-to-day problems, they go to the shaman, and you find a beautiful description of kalams and all that in Sangam literature. We'll not go into the detail. So I also documented some of the Paliyans of Varshanad Andipatti Hill, honey gathering people, and their rock paintings. Here you can see these rock paintings where they have a creeper ladder on top of which there is a Palian standing trying to dislodge the honeycomb. You can see people sitting on the animals. So this is at a place called Koilambara near Usilambatti, where these Palians collect honey. This particular site is called Tainkal. They name the location according to the resource that they offer. They are known as honey stone, Tainkal, and this is a group of Palian and other people who go for hunting. So I try to document their ways of life, and they helped me to interpret this painting. So when I saw this painting, I did not know its meaning. But when I spoke to them, they explained. Probably they were done by the ancestor. They simply used the ash and the charcoal. I asked them, why do you paint? They say that there is no purpose behind it. Sometimes you feel like doing it. So definitely they did not have sometimes any purpose. It is a way of expressing. This creative urge is there in human mind, especially after collecting honey or lying idle or simply sitting in a particular rock or cave. These people go and then they do the painting. So this is something very important, and there are more paintings found on the Western Ghats. In fact, the Western Ghats of Tamil Nadu has numerous paintings. We need to explore that areas. There are several caves. They have very beautiful naturalistic paintings. They have not been documented, and several scholars from Kerala, they are recently documenting all these paintings. This one is near Usilambatti, where you can see a deer and so many other animals, elephant and cattle. This we documented along with Gandhirajan near Usilambatti. So this is a honey gathering scene by Palians. So we also documented the honey gathering of the Palians who make a basket out of creeper. This is Irula honey gathering methods. So interestingly, you see these people working on honey gathering, and then they do the painting. So whatever they do in their day-to-day life, they were probably painting. And I feel some of the rock shelters were in fact the schools. They were like the modern day schools where we teach the youngsters. See, what happens is when they start painting, in a particular kind of rock shelter, it gives an impression, it has a profound impact on all the animals. Any kind of animal which visits the cave or the rock shelter would not stay. These images will scare them. Similarly, when humans live with their family or other people, they try to orient these scenes that this is the way we live. You hunt animals, and these kinds of scenes are depicted in the cave shelters so that the youngsters in a way can understand. Therefore, these rock shelters with the painting should not only be considered as the places of art, they were in fact archives, ancient archives, a kind of museum, a kind of library, a kind of school in the sense that education center in which these ancient communities taught their children and other people. Now we will move on to the literature sources and other archaeology sources, how they tell us about the pottery making and the craft specialization. I have taken certain crafts here: pottery making, iron working, copper bronze working, jewelry working, gold working, how these art forms transformed in the early historic time. I'll not go into the detail much, so you can read out these points here. Pottery making was one of the important professions. We have a lot of references to the potters who are making pottery. Potters had a very important role in the society in the early historic time. In the medieval time, they lost their status and they were called as Kalanchai Kove. But there is one beautiful poem in Sangam literature. I will share with that particular poem. This poem is sung in such a way. A lady expresses her predicament. This lady laments to a potter, "Oh potter, oh potter, I came all along in this long route, alone and rugged route. I came with my husband. Now my husband passed away. Kindly make an urn large enough to bury both of us." She says that I came like a lizard sticking to a wheel of the bullock cart moving. I came along with my husband. So she indirectly says that she was dependent. She was just following her husband, like the way a lizard that happened to stick onto a wheel of a bullock cart moves according to the whims and fancies of the driver of the bullock cart. And she compares her predicament, and finally she wants to die along with her husband. She wants to be buried in the same urn. So that particular idea is portrayed in this poem. So you get diverse varieties of pottery from this megalithic period. You get black-handed ware, you get such russet-coated painted ware. They have beautiful paintings, and it shows that these people had a way of expressing their ideas, expressing these kind of their artistic talent in these ceramic vessels. Here, look at it, another baby line decoration. They are found from Tirupurangod in Kerala. This is also from Kerala. These are all white painted black-handed ware. They are from Adichanallur. These are from Porundal. And here we have another kind of pottery, rouletted ware. So what happens, these potters, what works in the minds of potters? They started adopting new kinds of designs because of the Indian Ocean trade. As in the early historic time, they get to know about a lot of ways of making material culture. They had contacts with the Roman objects. So they are changing the way they produce objects. And what you see at the bottom is an amphora, on top is the rouletted ware, and they have fine workmanship on the interior. This pottery is now considered to have been produced near Bengal, but interestingly, these kind of forms influences. So this is another piece of artwork, line art drawn on a rouletted ware by a person. We don't know. Sometimes it is said the jeweler workers and others, in order to produce certain object, before producing certain design on some kind of medium, what they do, they draw it roughly. Here you can see an animal, and probably this person was a farmer, and he is holding something on his left hand. On the right hand, he is holding the animal. Look at his dress, and it is very typical. dress, and it shows that these people were producing cotton cloth. And here you can see a chariot here and a horse, and this was found at Arikemedu. Here you can look at this design. It is something very beautiful, and this particular chariot is considered to be Roman in origin. You also have the introduction of script, and then this is a terracotta from Nilgiris. You also get different kinds of terracotta from the Nilgiri hills. They tell about the creative methods, creative approaches of the potters of that period. This particular kind of artistic piece that was excavated at Adichanallur. Here you can see a lady standing, and her body is drawn in the shape of a wasp or a damaru or a drum. And look at the depiction here. There is a crop on which this bird is sitting, and there is an antelope here, and then lizard. We do not know what it means, but it is something very interesting. And in this period, you get a lot of these stamped pottery with the leaf motifs. So the pottery undergoes different kind of changes. So something working on in the minds of the craftsmen. And we also get a lot of evidences for weaving. People were weaving fine cloths, and in some time, women were also involved in weaving cloths, and they were known as Parthi Pindir. And women, and especially widows, were also weaving, and we get to know about this from the literature. I'll not go into the details. We had a very rich tradition of textile production, and this one, what you see on the right, is a kind of tank excavated at Kiradi. At Arikemedu and Urayur, they have excavated tank. What you see in the center is a spindle hole, and this was used for threading from cotton, and you have a textile fabric from Kodumanal, the site of Kodumanal. We also get a lot of evidence for iron smelting and a lot of other kind of crafts. Here, we also get evidence for copper bronze working, and this is something an interesting kind of an object. This was excavated by my friend Ravichandran near Pondicherry. Here you get, we get reference to come here as a bronze workers. Here you have these kind of bronze vessels from the Iron Age burial. Here you can see this kind of cattle, and all around there are these egrets or one kind of crane. And this is a very interesting scene. This occurs mainly in the paddy fields. In the wet field, I have seen in my village, whenever there is a buffalo or any other cattle grazing in the field, there will be a lot of birds are all around. So they will eat all the other insects that are disturbed by the movement of this animal. So such a naturalistic scene has been illustrated. We also get vessels with the buffalo head from several sides. So definitely these people of the Iron Age had an aesthetic sense. They did not just want to produce an object just like that. So they had an aesthetic sense which is reflected. And also they used symbolism. We get a Chera copper coin from the site of Pattanam. On the one side, it has a male elephant. On the other side, bow and arrow, and more coins of Chera period. And this is also a Chera coin. And these kind of copper objects have been excavated, and so many lamps. And when you look into the material culture of these burials, we get diverse varieties of material expressing their creative talent and their love for ornaments. You get a lot of cornelian beads and other materials from the site of Auroville, which was excavated by Ravichandran. And you have a tiger that was excavated at the site of Kodumanal. Probably it was on top of a finial. We don't know where exactly it was, but interestingly, it was studded with cornelian. And you get so many such objects. Here you can see this diverse variety of objects that were excavated at Auroville. Here you can see a peacock, and here cock, or here also rooster or cock, double fish. And this one I showed earlier, again antelope. So these people had an innovative way of decorating their objects, and that is very beautifully brought out in these objects. Even these cows were also decorated with these kind of bells, and they were excavated. This one is from Adichanallur. This is another bronze image, very interesting. These people had a very advanced jewelry making skills. This particular design is an imitation of amphora. It is a Roman design. So what happens, because of the Indo-Roman trade, these people started making diverse varieties of jewelry. So these are from the site of Kiradi, excavated by Tamil Nadu State Archaeology. And here you can see this kind of button. It was part of a dress. So these people had a very high taste and sophisticated kind of interest, and definitely local elites and kings might have used these kinds of ornaments, and they definitely indicates that urbanization began somewhere around 3rd century, 6th to 3rd century BC, and that really was boosted by the material wealth brought by the Roman trade. These are again spacer. They were excavated, two kinds of spacer. Look at this one and this one. Already I showed you another type. This was excavated near Sutukeni, near Pondicherry. Right now it is in Musigimi. These are the gold ornaments that were excavated from the megalithic burials, and again the same flowers. And this one was a Roman kind of, it's actually an Indian kind of ring in which there is a couple. So it is really very interesting that these people in the Sangam age had a very artistic kind of outlook. They had interest in aesthetics. Not only that, they appreciated these objects, and also they were artists who could produce. If you look at literature, you get a lot of references that these people in the early period were making several kinds of ornaments and several kinds of goods. Definitely this cross-cultural trade might have boosted. We also have evidence for the movement of Tamil craftsmen into Southeast Asia. We have an inscription called Perumpatan Kal discovered in Thailand. And here you can see different kinds of glass beads. People were fabricating. Sometimes you also find these kind of shapes in the form of a bird. So you get a diverse variety of material. These are all stone ornaments, stud stones, and here you can see a lot of cornelian stones, etched designs. So this is from Anakara, Kerala, and these are also from Kerala. How these people had appreciation for this. Definitely in the idea for of South Indian associating with gold, and their interest in gold must have began with the Roman trade. Even now, if you look at South India, people prefer gold jewelry rather than the other form of jewelry. That could be the reason why we have a lot of gold coin in South India. Probably these people bargained with the Romans, and they wanted mainly the gold coins, and that is why we find a lot of gold objects all across. Similarly, this red color is also was very much chosen by these people. That is why the cornelian was selling in large number. These were the beads collected from the site of Auroville, different kinds of material. You get lapis lazuli that came from Afghanistan, carnelian that came from Gujarat. So people were fond of these materials, and we find a lot of such beautiful objects from the excavation. This is again a cameo in which a pig, and probably it was part of a ring, and this was excavated at Kiradi. These are some of the other Roman objects. They are from Roman cameo from Pakistan. So definitely new ideas, when new ideas came as part of the Indo-Roman trade, people adopted. You get these kind of glass beads also, some more beads from the site of Purundal, and these are from Pattanam, where we find diverse variety of raw materials being processed, and people were making different kinds of stone and cameo and imported material. So definitely they reveal about the kind of interest of the people in producing as well as consuming aesthetic object. These are simple iron object. This is an inscription I mentioned. This reads Perumpatan Kal. Patan is identified as a Patan, as a gold worker. He went to Southeast Asia and made, probably he must have made jewelry. there, and Southeast Asia was known as Swarna Bhumi. So, and shell bangle is another kind of object that were very intensively produced mainly on the east coast. We have evidence for shell bangle working at Arikamedu, Adahanpulam and Korkai. Sangam literature talks about this Vela Parpan Valarundumitha Valai. Valai is the term, interestingly, even in Bengali, it is known as Bola. So these people were wearing these kind of shell bangles, and the Sangam poem very beautifully talks about shell bangles coming out of, falling out of the hands of the heroine who was longing for the hero who went away to earn wealth. Even from the site of Arahankulam, they have found a lot of such shell from the excavation. That tells us these people were highly productive. In the Sangam age, they were busy activities going on. Now we can make a meaning out of these references in the Sangam literature, which tells that the hero was moving away to earn wealth. So you get several such references, and also you get these are from Adahankulam, where you get where they have found Roman coins. Here I showed you this one. On the left hand side, here you see an interesting panel. Here you can see a lady who looks like an African with African feature, holding an amphora in the hand, and in front of him stands a man with a kind of object which has 7 divisions. There is another kind of lamp. It is unfortunately broken, but it is identified as a menorah. Menorah is a lamp associated with the Jews. So definitely we see a new kind of art forms evolving in the early historic period. I have not shown all the material culture of the Sangam age. If you look at intensively, apart from literature, you get a lot of such objects coming to the Tamil country or Tamilagam, definitely suggesting the urban nature, urbanization emerging in this part of the country, and people traveling all over the world and earning wealth, and South India acquiring an important place. I'm showing some more images, and I'll finish within 3-4 minutes quickly. So this is a Fortuna intaglio. This is again not a local design, and it is a Roman kind of belief. The traders thought this god would bring fortune. So Indians not only use the local iconography and local belief system, they also probably adopted the Roman cultural components here. So truly, in a sense, Sangam age could be considered as a kind of cosmopolitan kind of system, at least in some areas, as we know from Chilapadigaram and other texts. These were excavated. These are some of the later finds excavated. This one is a intaglio lion found at Pattanam, again glass, Roman glass. And this is very interesting design. See how these people were making an artifact into an ornament. How now we have so many ornament designs developing. So earlier I showed you an ornament designs developing from amphora. Here an axe of local. This is definitely a local design. They have converted, the artist, the jewelers have converted a local axe into a kind of pendant. This is something interesting. This was found at Pattanam. So these people definitely had an interest for these kind of objects, and that is where we see the material culture reflecting the artistic talent. And I think I am coming to the end of the presentation. Here I showed you again this, look at this particular amphora design. It is not local, it is a Roman design. And thus we have diverse evidences for the artistic talent as well as appreciation of ancient Tamils, who initially had a kind of native tradition in aesthetics, and later on when Indo-Roman or Indian Ocean trade was developing, they started adopting new traditions, and it shows that these people were open to ideas. As the Sangam literature tells, you get diverse varieties of art forms, and what I have showed you is only limited. And when you look at this, you can really understand the characteristics of the Sangam age societies. In fact, we have more such evidence to be documented. I think if we create a museum, it is our responsibility to create a digital museum. Suppose if these objects are going to stay in a museum, in a showcase as a small object, they may not convey an idea. Even these images that you see is the result of the power of photography. We have a photographer we had at the site of Pattanam, is Muhammad. He is from Calicut. He is one fantastic photographer I have seen. And a photo, you can understand how an excavation can be taken to the public only through photography more than the real object. Sometimes real objects may not be that communicative. But when you really use the correct strategy and correct light combination, you can really convey the idea to the people in a better fashion. That is where we have to do more through photography in illustrating the Sangam age culture. Definitely we can create a virtual museum of objects. Currently we have objects scattered in all the museums, scattered in all the museums. We need to bring them together and create one virtual Tamil cultural heritage digital museum for Sangam age that can really help people to visualize, people, especially people who cannot afford to travel, who cannot afford to go to all these museums. In fact, travel is only possible for people with some amount of money. But there are a lot of school children and living in the remote villages with no access, no knowledge, with only access to the textbook. So using digital media, we can really take our culture and the past cultural heritage of the Sangam age society to the people in a very attractive manner. This is where we should think of creating some digital atlases focusing only on the images, and that should be used in heritage education. With these few words, based on my limited understanding, I finish my lecture. I'm sorry that I have taken more of your time, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. This is such an amazing presentation, passionate, insightful. I'm actually at loss of words. Like, what is art? How do you define art? What is it a self-expression? Is it an idea, or is it functional? Like, I think each contemporary artist should look back to what our ancestors have done and kind of reinterpret what they want to do, what they are doing, and juxtaposing both is very important. And also to conclude this with a very grand vision that I think like each one of us should commit to. It's such a powerful vision, and it is an important one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. We can just leave open for any questions. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can unmute yourself. Anyone has any questions? Before we hear from everyone, I have one particular question. So how do you, what is the influence of Buddhism and Jainism in the Sangam period or pre-Sangam period art?
Yeah, Buddhism, actually we have evidence of these rock shelters with, mainly around Madurai and all across Tamil Nadu. And some of these caves are attributed to Shramanas broadly. And they brought several ideas, definitely. And some of the names of these Brahmi are in Prakrit. So it was definitely an open society in which, as the literature itself says, there were Yamanas, there were people from northern India, there were people from Southeast Asia. Sometime it is said some of the Southeast Asian ships, they were coming. If you look at the Indian Ocean, India is in the center of Indian Ocean, linking the West Asia and Southeast Asia. So especially the Tamils had a very advantageous position because they are very strategically located in South India. And if somebody wants to travel at that point of time directly to Southeast Asia or China to West Asia, West Europe or West Asia, it took long time. So the Tamils and Indians who were in the central position, they were involved in this kind of activities. In the colonial earlier interpretation, this idea of central stage of Indians were not given importance. So Wheeler, while writing about Archimedes, it talks about Indo-Roman trading center. But where are the Greek inscription from Archimedes? Except some amphora, it's only the Tamil inscription or Prakrit inscription. Same is the case in the other sites also. You get 50% or more than 50% Tamil inscription. So combining with the frequent allusion to the hero traveling to far away, definitely it suggests that Tamils had an important role. And they being in this particular part of the country, they could easily travel to Southeast Asia, and also they could easily travel to West Asia. So they had an intermediary role. This contributed to the importance of early historic trade network. So this was one of the factor. That is why even if you look at the later inscription, Zheng He inscription found in Sri Lanka, it is in 3 languages, Chinese, Arabic and Tamil. So Tamil was a kind of lingua franca adopted by the traders. So I try to argue something like what Sheldon Pollock has argued as Sanskrit cosmopolis. Tamil was adopted by the traders of the Indian Ocean. We have a lot of Tamil inscription, mainly Nana Desis and Tisai Ainutuvar, even in the later period of time. So, this is the context in which we find a rich variety of material that we are excavating at Pattanam or Kiradi or other sites. So we should see all that in that light. So this particular trade connection gave a lot of ideas. Recently, I was visiting some of the museums with the Roman artifacts. So we cannot understand the cultural material coming from Tamil Nadu sites just by looking at Tamil Nadu. This is when I've been arguing that we need to teach our students about Afro-Eurasian and Indian Ocean history. We cannot teach Tamil Nadu history by just looking into Tamil Nadu. So we have to move out and like Yadum Ure, Avarunkalir, in one sense, Indian history should be taught by looking into Indian sources available within India and sources starting with East Africa. We have ignored East Africa. Everybody wanted only Roman, Indo-Roman. Now scholars say that it should be visualized as a Indian Ocean. So we should not only, we should not only focus on Roman connection. We had connection with Africa. We have connection with West Asia. So we should visualize the history as Afro-Eurasian world at one point and the Indian Ocean and that connectivity. This has been going on. It started, it was a kind of proto-globalization that happened about 2,500 years ago. And then again, we keep having these kind of globalization that gave in a lot of new ideas and a lot of wealth, and that history has not been properly brought out. And digital media gives a good opportunity to bring out that particular history. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a beautiful presentation. I mean, but this leads to one more question. We are talking about this united ancient Tamilagam. And in present times, 2000 years after that, we are kind of divided, even fractionally, we can say, with different language, different culture, different ideologies. So, what do you think the relooking of the history of ancient Tamilagam has got to do now? And what is the future for this region? Like, do you think of politically there is a possibility for a, yes?
Actually, we need to look at history in the connectedness. Most of the time, we live in the modern time. We talk about only Tamil Nadu or only, Kerala or Andhra or Karnataka. And this is a time I think we need to look beyond. We need to look into the connected histories. These regions or boundaries were created in the contemporary times. In ancient time, people were connected. As far as Tamilagam history is concerned, I think we need to work together. People working not only Tamilagam, also in other regions like Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra. There are a lot to understand. If you take the Neolithic culture, we have a lot of evidence in Andhra and Karnataka. See, they are all adjacent regions. So in a way, we live in modern Tamil Nadu. We think only about it. But for archaeologists and historians, they need to look at the history as a whole. In fact, we should study entire Indian history because we have a lot of connectivities across, and the kind of research that we are doing is not sufficient. And also certain questions we cannot answer immediately. I think the history of studying Tamilagam archaeologically, I think it's very important, and also it needs to be promoted. If you take the history teaching, what happens sometimes, students from Tamil Nadu, they study only Cholas. They do not study anything about the other Shatavahan and others. Same with many people. Same here by writing, about our own history in English. I think this is something very important. By writing these connectivities and other importance of this particular cultures and producing good documentaries can help promote understanding. Students have, to help students to have a different outlook. Only now there is an interest in archaeology after Kirdi excavations, and I think we need to take this forward in creating museums. See, this is what I've been telling. See, we had such great kings like Rajaraja and Rajendra. How many museums we have created? Do we have one museum that tells about Tamil history in a comprehensive manner? No. So for us, museum means something, just keeping some objects and, telling a story. Do we have a narrative theme? One particular theme, places like Kanyakumari or Madurai or Chennai, we need to have a comprehensive museum. And nowadays, the digital kind of concept, because if I am going to, display only the artifacts that are excavated. See, what we are excavating in a site is only a fragment. I showed a button. It is when you are trying to display this in a when you try to display a broken pottery in a piece, what kind of narrative you are showing? It is just a part. So it is the responsibility of artist and photographer to build a complete picture. Nowadays, with the skull, they try to reconstruct. So in our museums, we need to go beyond looking at pottery fragments and small fragments into the bigger picture. So whatever we have from excavation is like a one, say, let's say you have Picasso's painting, we have just one fragment of Picasso's painting. Suppose if you are going to keep this, all the great painters painting in small pieces in a museum, what the student would understand. So it is a responsibility of artists or others to bring in the bigger picture, for which we need to do much more serious work. Apart from excavation is one, excavation is a technical job. They throw the object, and from there we need to build a narrative, and for which we need a lot of intellectual exchange, intellectual interaction among scholars and artists and photographer and painters, so that the whole culture could be visualized without distorting the basic information. There is no point in sometime exaggerating. So by excessively exaggerating, the real climb also could be damaged. So it needs some fine balance in illustrating our culture and our heritage in a proper manner through the museums and textbooks and digital media. This is a great task. It cannot be done by historians or just archaeologists, because they look at only certain aspects. So it is up to the other community as a whole. They need to visualize this as a whole and illustrate this kind of cultural heritage narrative, which is not easy, which is a very tough task. And many of the Western universities and museums, they have done it. If you visit some of the museums, even some of the simple sites are being exhibited in an attractive manner. So yeah, that's what my point is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your reinvigorating words. Echelocum Trust for Photography is actually committed to create and contribute to the creation of such a narrative. I think that's where we are blending in, and as you have rightly said, photography and archaeology has a lot in common. Both is imagination. There's lots of combination: history, sociology, culture. A lot of things intermingle in photography and archaeology. And you can say photographs of future epigraphs in that way. And the idea of this digital museum or digital archive is an area that we are very much interested in, and this is an area which is very much needed. And I think photographers, especially, should take note of this. And
also mixing Sangam literature poems. Even I have seen, I found a beautiful poem in, I think it is in Perumbana Trupadai, I don't remember the verse, where the poet talks about a jackfruit tree on which there are pepper creeper and there is a buffalo sleeping. So you get very beautiful such scenes in Kerala. So the Sangam age poets were also in a sense, they didn't have camera, so they have their brain, and using that they have portrayed. So literature also gives a lot of insights in visualizing. So we need to visualize the ideas of Sangam poets, the way they compare this Purananuru 343 poem, how they compare the ship on the land and the house on the river, where the heaped paddy it resembles house. It's again a beautiful expressions of visualization. At that point of time, they didn't have they were not photographers, they just portrayed the same idea through the words, text. So
yeah, right. Poetry and photography also has a lot in common. Do we have any questions? Any of us has any questions?
Hello, I'm Jayan.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Jayan from Ernakulam.
Oh.
Okay, I'm a potter. I'm very interested with your talks. I want to know about the history of South Indian potters.
Yeah, pottery. This is something. This is another important area. I'm doing a project on the potters of Tamilagam. These two communities, we have not given importance to the crafts groups. This is one bad approach of our history. See, what happened is in historical approach, we missed environment. We teach our students the sources of history is archaeology and written document. We ignored everything. We forgot living tradition. Actually, the fisherman community, with regard to the coast of India, the fisherman community were the key people. If you look at Sangam literature, the Paradavas were important, and they had important role in supporting the navigators. Even during the colonial time, the fishermen communities were the key because they knew the local navigation knowledge. They were very important. The fisherman community is one important. Similarly, the potters with whom I work with, and I have written in my paper, the potters were the ritual specialists because they were like, they were creating gods in the early time. And it is their role that the Brahmins took over in the later period, and their social status came down. And I'm very interested in talking to these potters wherever I go. I have several videos and also photographers and recording. And I have another beautiful painting documented at Victoria Albert Museum. It is from Kerala, where a lady and her husband, they sit opposite to each other and make pottery. I think this patriarchal concept of, the male, female, male superior relationship comes only in the agrarian landowning communities. In some of the fishermen and these communities, this idea of equality is there. I have seen among the elders, and I have interacted with some of the potters. They treat their women equally because they sit together and work. So potter community is one important, that is fast disappearing. Even our students are documenting these potters, pottery makers, and also iron workers. See, these craft people were very important for the economy till the colonial people, companies were created. That is where the corporatization that took place. And it is, in a way, I think some of the Gandhian ideas were good in reviving the crafts. And this is something which we need to do. Teaching pottery as a craft in the school. This is very tricky. And we all have the notion, it is only computer which is important. What is the point of, there are so many people with the computer, and the computer is not important. So I'm very much interested in the history of potters. Wherever possible, I go and document. And it is high time we need to do these, teachings rather than, you give a lot of theories. Theories are important. Without that, I think this kind of craft education was there in the early period. There are several scholars who are working on it, that at some point of time it was abandoned. It has to be taught in a very careful manner without actually bringing any prejudice. It should be purely independent. So I think Potters community is one important community, and their history needs to be documented in a more intensive manner, and photographers can do this. Similarly, fisher folk and several communities, especially I remember when I was a kid, I used to see these ladies, especially these old ladies, and with a lot of shrinking face, and they used to carry curd, they used to sell. And these people, old ladies, widows, and they were contributing to economy. I still have their images in my mind. Unfortunately, I don't have camera. And therefore, we have a lot of scope for writing alternate history rather than the main narratives of, certain dominant communities. And these kind of small communities and their histories can be documented, not necessarily through writing lot of text, simple photography and small text, and these kind of realistic assignment to the school college students. Wherever I give lectures to the school and college teachers, I tell them, you document this. There is no point in everybody writing a thesis about small MA dissertation about Tanjavur temple. What is the point, 100 people writing a dissertation on Tanjavur temple, Madurai temple? That's why I tell our students, you go and do field work of your village. Village history is another important point. We missed. Village life is fast changing. Tsunami came, all the kattumarams went, all fiber. So any one event changes, our entire way of life. With this corona, many things will be wiped out. This is the reality. I think this is where we can do a lot of things. And also cobblers. Whenever I meet cobblers sometime in the bus stand, I chat with them. This is, in a way, it is not necessary as a researcher, as a student or a scholar, that we go only to the library. I think when you interact with these kind of craftspeople, that's what I tell my students. If you go to a village, you talk to the this potter. This is something which I learned last year only when I went for field work with my student near Nallur, Kumbakonam. There is a potter who makes pot, and he was explaining me these potters today, they have a kind of tool made of animal horn with a lot of decoration. There they explained a pot that was used for making sweet pongal is made with the decoration. A normal pot will not have. So therefore, we have a lot of things to learn by interacting with, by undertaking folklore, village level, craftsman, field work. that can be a learning experience. This is what I also could understand from my own experience. When we go to field and when you talk to them, patiently, when you talk to them with a kind of understanding and empathy and collect data, they are like biological archives, I would call. By taking a lot of questions, we can learn a lot. The same way, I've been very much interested in the history of Potters community, and this is something we need to write collectively at village level, history of the crafts group. This is something important, and this cannot be done in the universities, because universities, I say, the syllabi is the problem. We have a syllabus, we have mark sheets, evaluation, and that doesn't allow a holistic approach to the research. So when you go and meet the people, when you go and talk to them, you learn a methodology. That is why I would say sometimes we have to throw all these methodology and just go to the field and interact with the people. So therefore, I say I'm very happy that you are here, and the study of Potters and their way of life and approach is something very interesting, and we need to do further research.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll ask you some questions after it.
Okay, right.
ETP is working on 2 projects at the moment. One is the Three Sangam ports, where we try to create contemporary visuals of the port regions and the connected maritime regions. Plus River Kaveri, where we are planning to exactly what you are saying, different lifestyles, different communities, their customs, rituals, ethos. We did one project in Tiruvannamalai where we had about 40 photographers working on different aspects of Tiruvannamalai. That was like a pilot project we did. This is a large-scale project, and I think it will end up in a vision that you have very beautifully presented during your presentation. So hopefully, it's quite challenging with the present political and economical situation to raise funds and involve that in the speed with which we want to do it. But we are dedicated, and slowly and steadily we are working towards it. And we have spoken about it earlier. And so we hope to form a network of photographers locally placed who can continuously work over a period and document these visuals and make it in the public domain for people to access, researchers and academicians to use with a free of access facility. So we hope that we will be able to make that happen. Anyone else having any questions?
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Hello, sir. This is Niranjana speaking.
Okay, yeah, tell me. Yeah.
So I'm a journalist. First I would say that I agree with the global historical connectivity and continuum that you were talking about.
Yes.
Which actually I came across with my interaction with Korean people and their linguistic roots similarity, cultural and linguistic similarity with South India. I kind of assume it's more with Tamil Nadu and a little bit with Malayalam as well because of the Tamil-Malayalam connection. My question was that I keep coming across news reports regarding new excavations that have happened in India. One of them that I read recently was about Vanur Taluk, I think so, if my pronunciation is right, in Villupuram. So there was an excavation related to the Sangam era over there. But what I do not understand is that how is it that the context behind the discoveries related to excavation seems to be missing in most of these reports? So beyond what has been discovered, so we would come to know that there was pottery and that there was certain objects that were discovered, but how does it connect with our understanding of our culture? So that kind of connectivity and context doesn't seem to be framed well. So I was wondering whether that can be framed well. Plus, has there been any kind of new knowledge that has been discovered through these recent findings. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing is that we need to have a good theory. See, most of our teaching focuses on finding facts, finding object, listing categories. Just by adding data is good without a proper theoretical framework. So we have data. When in 1940s, when Wheeler excavated, they did not have the framework of Indian Ocean. Wheeler, you might have heard about Mortimer Wheeler. He was having the framework of Indian Ocean. So he had a framework of Indo-Roman trade. So the framework is very important. When you need to have a theoretical framework. You need to know a society. This is what I argue. How can you understand India without going to different parts of India? Without reading, without visiting, just by reading 20 books, can you understand India? You cannot. Same way, my own understanding has been by traveling to different areas, traveling to different culture, only we can understand. This is where I also have problem with this ideas of these, genetic studies. So it is much more deeper work. Understanding culture is not something just by undertaking genetics we can do. The recent excavation, yes, they have added more data. You're right, because so far we never located the town of Madurai. So this Kiradi excavation has revealed more about the towns. Actually, every village has an archives underneath. So by excavating, we get to know about the real settlement of a particular period. All these new excavation, they have been excavating near Chennai and all these places. They have been adding new data to these data sets. Therefore, new data is important. New data gives us new understanding. Otherwise, we keep on repeating the same old thing. So the new data helps us looking at new things. At the same time, we need a good theory. Without a theoretical framework, we will not be able to interpret. That is where it is very important that we need to have a kind of theory so that the data can be fitted in. It is like fixing some images. If we are getting, like, you have a photo that has been torn into 120 pieces. Now, you have to have some conception. Sometimes it evolves naturally. So you need to have some, archaeology is also like that. It's like we are trying to reconstruct the canvas. So the new data is very important. It helps us to gain clarity and look at things differently. Therefore, the theoretical perspective is very important. Only when you look into with a proper theoretical framework, by incorporating archaeology, literature,